Good Bach, everyone. Shavua Tov. Motzaei Shabbos Parshas Chai Sarah. So I'm going to start off. We've said we're going to start off with the story of Tzaddik and Baal Shem Tov. But this week we're going to tell the story not of the Baal Shem Tov, but of a few generations before, quite a bit, a few hundred years before, of a story of the Taz and the Bach. I'm actually a grandson of the Taz and the Bach. We learn about the Taz and the Bach a lot in our Shulchan Aruch class, so it's appropriate. The Taz's name was Reb David Halevi Segel, and the Bach's name was Ziel Sirkush. That's the titles that we call them on is based on the titles of their books, their Sfarim they wrote on halacha. And this also includes the story of the Megala Mukos. His name was Nasa Nata Shapiro, which is connected actually to the Baal Shem Tov because one of the Baal Shem Tov's main Talmidim, the Pinchas of Karitzer, was a direct descendant of, his name was Pinchas Shapiro, direct descendant of the Megala Mukos. It's an amazing story. There's a few versions of the story. This story is actually found in the Hagdama, in the book of the publication of the Megala Mukos. So the Megala Mukos and the Bach lived in the city of Krakow. Krakow is in Poland, was the most well-known city of Judaism, of Judaism at that time. The Ramah, the Ashkenazic authority on halacha, lived in Krakow. The Tosef Siantif. I mean, literally the who's who of Polish Jewry in that time was from Krakow. Also, of course, there's the city of Prague, but that wasn't on the level of the great sages of Krakow. You go into the cemetery of Krakow. And the Taz is the son-in-law of the Bach, and he lives in the city Lvov, Lemberg. So the story goes, it's a beautiful story. It's a powerful lesson that the Taz, when he was appointed Rav, now the distance between Lemberg, Lvov, and Krakow is about 350 kilometers, so it's quite a distance. So when the Taz was appointed Rav in Lemberg and Lvov, so he wanted to travel to his father-in-law, the Bach, in Krakow. It says in the Hagdam of the book in the Megala Mukos, it says that when he left to go to Krakow, the whole city of Lvov came out to honor the Taz, and everyone was there. And then he comes to Krakow, and the Bach is very excited. His son-in-law comes to visit him, and the whole town is very happy, very excited. The great visit of the son-in-law of the Rav. So the Bach was the Rav of the city, and the Megala Mukos was the Reish Mesifta, the head of the yeshiva. So the whole city comes to greet the son-in-law of the Rav, and also a tremendous Rav in his own right, the Taz, the Rav of the city of Lvov, Lemberg, the same Polish it's Lvov, and in German it's Lemberg. So so everyone comes to greet him, and the Megala Mukos, who's the head of the yeshiva, doesn't join to greet the son-in-law of the Rav of the Bach, then the Taz. The Shabbos comes, and here's a picture of the Taz. This is the picture they have of the Taz. This is the Taz, obviously in his later life. So the story goes is that Shabbos as well, the Megala Mukos comes to shul, and so does the Taz, and everyone's greeting the Taz, and this is the gravesite of the Bach. This is the tombstone of the Bach, and this is the tombstone of the Megala Mukos. Is this one over here? So he says, or maybe they're both. This is also the Bach. Either way, so he says the Bach, the Megala Mukos doesn't come to greet the Taz, doesn't say Good Shabbos, doesn't welcome him. He's very offended. Again, another week goes by. According to the Sefer, it's not another week; it's another week goes by, and everyone's greeting the Taz on Shabbos, and the Bach doesn't come and say hello. Sorry, the Megala Mukos doesn't come to say Good Shabbos, and he makes a big scene. He's not going to greet the son-in-law of the Bach, the great Taz. And by this point, the Taz and the Bach are both very offended. Why is the Megala Mukos treating him this way? I mean, the Megala Mukos was a huge tzaddik. He was a visionary. He was a big Kabbalist. And here the whole city is greeting the Taz, and the Megala Mukos is ignoring him. So the Bach starts to write. He calls in and says, this is a Motzaei Shabbos story. So Friday afternoon or morning, he calls in all the heads of the of the Jewish community of Krakow, and he in a secret meeting, and he says that the Megala Mukas is openly shaming my son-in-law, the Taz. We have to do something. I want your opinion. I don't want to act on my own. So they said, listen, it's a difficult question. We'll come back on Motzaei Shabbos. On Motzaei Shabbos, Saturday night, we're going to come back and we'll discuss it. And they come back Motzaei Shabbos, and then the Taz was having his third meal, and he gets very nervous, and he knows from heaven, because it was a very top secret, but he was a very godly person in the Megala Mukas, and he knows that they're sitting down to excommunicate him, to write him a strong letter. So at Saturday night, the custom of Krakow was that all the shochtim, the slaughterers, would come on Saturday night to the Megala Mukes to show him, because on Saturday night he would start slaughtering for the new week, any questions that he had on the cows if they were kosher. So he said, I can't answer any questions. I'm too overwhelmed. They said, why not? We need to know if the meat is kosher. He says, well, the Rav is sitting with all these rabbis, and they're looking to send me a strong letter because I can't say why. I couldn't greet the Taz. And as long as this letter is there, I'm not going to, I can't, as long as they're writing, I can't do anything. So he says, what can we do? He said, go over there and tell them. So they go in, and the book says they went in, they tore up the paper. Either way, finally the Megala Mukas comes into shul after another time of kind of ignoring him, and he comes in, he hugs the Taz, and he greets the Taz, and he welcomes the Taz, and the Taz says, I don't want to talk to you. You embarrassed me. What happened? So finally, he told him like this. There's two versions to this story, but I'm going to say the version that I've heard. Rabbi Karbach says the story. Rabbi Shlomo Karbach, he says like this, that when you were leaving Lvov to come to Krakow, there was a poor woman, mamish in rags, holding her child, and come crying to you and ask for bracha for the health of her child. And you blessed her, and the baby got better. But in Shemayim, in heaven, they looked and they said, why weren't you concerned about her well-being? She comes a poor woman with ripped clothing. You see she has nothing. Maybe why didn't you ask if she had herself what to eat? The fact that you ignore the fact that she looked poor and you could have helped her, in heaven, it was decreed that you were excommunicated for 30 days. Because the Megala Mukas sees everything, he knew that he was excommunicated, so I couldn't come greet you, but now the 30 days are over. So I could greet you. This is a story which is, again, we're talking about giants of people. The Bach, it says that the Bach, when he passed away, we see him all the time in our Shulchan Aruch class, that he didn't want, they said he doesn't have to go to hell because he's such a great tzaddik, but he said, everyone has to go to hell a little bit, so he also wants to go to hell for a little bit. So they were able to find a little sin that possibly he did unbeknowing, causing animals to walk together because they followed him, and they cooled down. It says they cooled down hell for hours. So the time he dips in there for a little bit, this is how great these sages were. So the Bach could go into hell for a little bit and then go into heaven. He went in there for a reason. He took out a whole bunch of souls that were stuck in hell. He went in there. He had a mission. He had an agenda. He took them all out and brought them to heaven with him. Okay. That's our little story in honor of Janice, who inspired that we say story Motzaei Shabbos. I hope she's watching on YouTube. We're learning in the laws of davening. The laws of davening we hold like this. It says, mitzvah loretz k'shahoylech lebeis haknesses. It's a commandment, so to say. It's a mitzvah to run or to kind of walk fast. You could say rush when you go to the shul, or the beis medrash, or to the house of learning, to show excitement to go. Or the shar mitzvahs, and the same thing applies to any mitzvah. Ratz ledvar mitzvah, you run towards a mitzvah. Shneimar nirdefa ladas es Hashem. So as it's written, let us run to know God, which is both in prayer and study. And it says, the way to your commandments I will run. Even though Shabbos one shouldn't run, but when talking about going to shul, mutar laretz ledvar mitzvah, to a mitzvah you could run. But once you enter the synagogue, or beis medrash, or once you enter this place of learning, so once you enter the place of learning, then in the synagogue or in the place of learning, it's forbidden to run. When you get into the entry of you're about to enter the synagogue, you should wait a bit. Kind of calm down because you ran to the shul. So what? Slow down, stop for a second. So you shouldn't walk in a kind of just suddenly into the shul. Ve'yerasa ve'yifchad mihadar ga'oinis barach. And as you should tremble with awe before the splendor of the glory of Hashem. V'yomer pasuk, and you should say the verse when you enter the shul. V'ani beroiv chazdecha avoy v'esecha ishtachva l'chal kodshecha b'yirasecha, which we say in the Matovu. And then he says, Shehu kumayin etilas rishus. When you say v'ani beroiv chazdecha, it's kind of you're asking God permission to walk into the synagogue. And then when you enter, you should walk with fear and awe. As you're standing before a king. Don't be familiar and casual in a shul. In the communities where the Jews have their own streets, whether it is in the shtetl or in the ghetto, or in Eretz Yisrael for that matter. So then it's a mitzvah lisati b'tzitzis ulaniach tefillin beveisai. Then you should put on your tzitzis, and meaning your talis, and your tefillin at home, and walk with your talis and tefillin in the street to the shul. But if you live amongst the nations, amongst the Gentiles, or if you're going to walk in unclean areas, so it's not clean to walk with your talis and mainly your tefillin. Then you should put on, which is the custom by many people, that you do not put on their talis and tefillin in the synagogue itself, meaning the proper sanctuary, but in the synagogue building, in the presdar, in the halls, or there's the back room, they'll put on their talis and tefillin so they could walk into shul already wearing the talis and tefillin. Kihu inyan gadol, it's a big deal. Likones, the Beis HaKnesses, Ma'utav, Batzitzis, Umuchtar, Batfilin. It's a big deal to walk into shul already garbed in your tzitzis, in your talis, and crowned with your tefillin. Okay, let's see the footnotes on this. The pasuk is, he quotes the verses, the sources of the verses. 31 is what? Is talking about, here we go. Therefore, even on Shabbos, it's not proper to run on Shabbos, except mentioned here to a mitzvah or to run into the synagogue. 32, we're supposed to say, the verse concludes with the words, I shall enter your house, which is talking about, it says, as for me, though, the abundant kindness, etc., as I enter your house, which you're asking God permission to enter the house of prayer, which is Danit Tefilasi, which that we say before we go into shul. 33, is it here? Can't see, hold on. I don't think there's any more footnotes on this one. Okay, let's go a little further. We're going to make sure where's 33 all the way down here. Okay. So the law is basically that you should, if you can, in a place, I don't know, New York doesn't really count. A, it's not so clean, and B, it's not a street of only Jews, maybe in Borough Park, but it's mamish streets of Jews. But I don't think regular streets in America are streets that people walk in their talis and film. Also about the cleanliness today. But in Yerushalayim, you see people walking with their talis and film, meaning they're wearing their talis and their film as they walk into shul. Means even from home. Okay, but if it says that if you can't do it at home, then try to put it on before in the entry room, and then walk into the sanctuary ready with your talis and your film. He continues. What happens if some sort of emergency is happening or some other thing that's preventing you, in a way out of your control, to go to the synagogue or to this house of study to daven? Or any other set minyan, not even in a shul, for whatever reason, there's an obstacle, you can't go. So what should you do? It's even better to try to gather. Let's say in COVID we had this, right? You couldn't go to shul. There's nothing you could do. Certain places the public shuls were closed. So and I'm not saying in COVID also you should maybe gather 10 people in your house, but in other situations similar to that, where it's safe to be together with other people. So then you should try to gather 10 people even in your house to make a minyan. Sometimes it's weather permitting. There's other questions why we would be in such a situation where you can't go to shul. Or you're sick, etc. let's say you can't gather 10 people to your home, and you can't go to shul. So try to daven the same time the shul is davening, the minyan's davening. Sha'azi Eis Ratzin, it's a time of desire. When the minyan is davening, so you daven with them, although you're not in the same room or building as them, or even street as them, but it's kind of the right time to daven. What about a person who lives in a place that has no minyan? So yispal b'shar shazibim mispal ba'ayares. Try to daven in the place where you know that other people are davening in the cities. You live in a place in the big city, you know that in the big city that they're davening at this time. That so you could check their schedule and you could daven. But if you're in a situation that you must study Torah or do work which you are prohibited to begin before praying, right? You're not supposed to work before you daven. This is Achim Tzarech Limud Lasik Mlachta and Chutzlai. When Yisbar Leil Simin Ches the Asur Lahaskal Kodim Tefilah. A person should not start doing work or learning Torah before davening. So if you're going to wait for the minyan in the city, you need to do things, but you can't do things before you daven. You're not supposed to work before you daven. You could daven from when the sun rises. Talking about the Magala Mukis, and Magala Mukis' name was a Nasim Nata Shapiro. So I read that the father of the Pinchas Karitzer, who was again this big one of the big students of the Baal Shem, the holy Baal Shem Tov, what was the merit that the father had to have such a great tzaddik, the Pinchas Karitzer, that he was once walking into shul, and a Gentile who was like a thief or something, whatever it was, a guy who just had things. How he had things, he didn't, people would. He was a drunk who just needed some money. He didn't care what he was selling, and he was selling a piece of gold as if it was a piece of copper. He didn't know the difference, or he didn't care. And he could have made a lot of money if he just bought the piece of gold at the price he was asking. He was asking for, $10. He could have asked for $10,000. It was gold. But he wouldn't do business before davening. So he said to him like this, come back to me after davening. In the meantime, someone else bought it who became very wealthy. And because he wouldn't do business before davening, even though he had a huge opportunity, the point is he had a huge opportunity to do business. It was legal. He didn't do anything wrong, but he wanted to wait till after davening. So in heaven, they were excited and they blessed him that he should have a son, the Pinchas Karitzer, Pinchas Shapiro, who is the great grandson again of the Megala Mukis. So again, it's a big deal not to do any business or work before you daven. If you're weak and find it difficult, and again, if you're going to daven, so there's another situation. The first situation is you can't go to a minyan. And also, or in a situation where you have to do things, and if you wait for the minyan, it's going to be too late. So if you're waiting for the minyan, I just want to make sure if he says, it seems like the case that he said in the previous law, that however, if you must study Torah, do work, which is prohibited, you may begin before praying, as it explained in chapter 8. So then it seems like we're talking about in either case, even if there's a minyan around, or if you're in a place where there is no minyan, but you want to daven at the same time as a minyan. But what about if you have to eat? And if you wait till after the minyan is like Aaron, I think you once asked about diabetes, if you have to eat, and if you don't eat, it's unhealthy. So there is in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch it says that they can't wait till the minyan finishes or starts to eat until after the congregation davens. Then you don't have to go to the shul. You could daven earlier at home in order to be able to eat right after davening. Yes, Aaron. If you're talking, I can't hear you. Aaron, you're saying okay. I don't hear you. There's no voice coming over. I still don't hear you.
Just hold on.
Oh, no, go. Here you go.
I gotta do it this way. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so the question is that like my son says, if you're not eating bread, so then you could eat like a little bit of like a cookie or something, and then pray, but try not to eat bread.
Okay, so there's different customs about that. There's different people. Some people won't eat anything before. In Chabad, we even eat mizonot, which is like cakes or stuff, before davening, and definitely drink. Some people are very careful. So there's different customs with regard to that. So depending on your custom. But here he's saying is if a person needs to eat properly, let's say you want to have a proper breakfast, so better to daven earlier, and then I'll say again, as Motzaei Shabbos, we could say stories. We're giving a little leniency. But the Rebbe Marash's wife, Rebbe Rivka, was once sick, and she was very careful not to daven before she herself was careful not to daven before she finished daven, not to eat before she davened at the minyan. So the doctors told her she was sick, that she has to eat early in the morning. So she would wake up very early to daven, so then she could eat. So her father-in-law, the third Rebbe Chabad, the Tzemach Tzedek, told her actually better to eat first and then daven. And he said because like this, your whole it's better to eat so you could daven than you daven so you could eat. Sometimes you have to, if it's kind of really doesn't work for you, especially she was very used to davening the minyan, maybe it made her wake up earlier, which also wasn't healthy. So in the question of health, better to do things that are more healthy. And in this case, he told her, eat first, and you'll daven afterwards. So there's also the leniency to eat first. But here he says, in some cases, better if you feel better to daven first, so you could daven earlier. That's what he's saying. But here he says an interesting thing, which some people don't know. That if a person wants to daven early, a person may think that maybe I should go to shul and daven early. And he says, no, only at home you could daven before the minyan. You can't go to the shul to daven unless you see mamish the minyan is davening late, and then you can't wait. Then you could say, okay, the minyan is mamish starting late, so I want to daven early. But to go initially and daven in the shul before the minyan, that you shouldn't do. Which is interesting because some people actually have a reverse custom. They say, I can't daven with the minyan, but at least I want to daven in the Beis HaKnesses. And we mentioned that in the earlier law, that better to daven in the Beis HaKnesses than to daven at home because it's a place of a shul. But that's only if you're going to daven in a Beis HaKnesses where maybe there is no minyan or something. But if there's a minyan, you're coming before the minyan to daven, better to hello Dani Gudvach. So then better not to daven in the shul unless it's mamish, they're davening late. So too, if you're not feeling well, or any kind of other emergency, then you can daven in the shul. But again, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says better to daven at home than to make a scene, so to say, and daven in the shul early, which means to show that you're kind of publicly not respecting the minyan. All right, it's not. There's no real clarity what to do in these situations. It seems like if you're just trying to break it down from what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says, that if you're sick and you can't wait for the minyan to daven, so daven, you could daven earlier at home. But be at home, don't be at shul unless it's a situation where they're obviously davening late, so it's not kind of like a shaming the minyan. But if not, better to daven at home than to daven in the shul early. Which again, before we mentioned in the beginning of this chapter, we mentioned there's an idea to daven in the shul even if there is no minyan. But here you're kind of shaming the minyan itself. Forget the synagogue. Yes, Aaron.
What about I noticed this even in 770, the Chabad headquarters. They have a big coffee bar, and people are getting coffee and then taking it to their seat where they daven.
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, because you have to remember, 770s is a beis medrash, really. It's a place that they study the whole day. So it's a beis medrash. It's more of a beis medrash. Most of the day, it's a study place, and the boys that study there, you have a coffee while they're studying. So we learned before there's a difference between a strict synagogue and a beis medrash. I would say 770 is more of a beis medrash because there's learning. A beis medrash has different leniencies. So to have coffee while you're learning, it's a normal thing. In every yeshiva, they have coffee by their places.
Yeah, but I see them. Well, I also see it at other shuls. People bring a coffee and sip it while they're davening. Is that acceptable?
Okay, sometimes it depends. Some people need a drink, but if you're talking about just like through casual coffee, it's a good question. But it's probably strictly speaking, it's probably better not to. But I've seen even a chazan sometimes bring a glass of water up if it affects their prayer. He says like this: even if you want to leave the synagogue to pray before the congregation starts, it is forbidden. It means you can't leave the congregation to daven before it starts, unless you see that the congregation is late. So here, I just want to read. So he's talking about that you're in the shul and you see. Okay, let's just read this scenario again. I think I didn't read it clearly. It says like this. Only in your house you could daven before. In the case if you're not feeling well, emergency, you have to eat, etc. But he's right. If you want to leave the shul, you're in the shul, you come in there, you say, "Oh, the minyan is not starting for another hour." But to leave the shul to daven before the minyan is forbidden, unless you see that the minyan is going to be really late, and so then you have to daven on your own. It's okay. Okay, but he said, but again, it's better not to go to the shul than to leave it, or to go into the shul and daven on your own without the minyan. But he says other authorities disagree with this decision. If one has to leave on a trip, he may leave and pray at home. So if you come into shul and you see, so it's not even an emergency, but you have to go somewhere, and you see the shul, the minyan's not starting on time, you can leave the shul and daven at home. He actually doesn't say clearly about davening in the shul alone. Let's just bring down the cases again. Someone who's sick and needs to eat before davening, because you can't wait, so then you could daven at home right away. Only in your house, he says. But if you want to leave the synagogue, you're not in the synagogue, you're going to leave the synagogue to daven early, you're only allowed to do that if it's mamish late, or according to some commentaries, even if you're just going on a trip. And then he says, if you're sick, if there's other emergencies, then you could daven even in the shul alone. So it seems like, yes, they don't want you to daven in the shul alone unless really it's an emergency. And still better to not to daven in the shul and daven at home, not to daven in a public place without the minyan. Okay, let's just do one more law. This happens all the time. There's a rotation of minyanim, right? You have a 6 o'clock minyan, a 7 o'clock minyan, an 8 o'clock minyan. So what happens if you have such a situation? Okay, and okay. I've seen people maybe a little lenient in this ruling. The second chazan shouldn't stand in the same place as the first chazan unless the entire first minyan left. But if they're lapping into each other, you can't stand right where the other guy is standing when he's finishing and you're starting. What happens if the first minyan took out a Torah and they're reading in it? So the second, so he says, if the first minyan took out a Sefer Torah and read from it, the second minyan should not take out the Sefer Torah again to read from it in that synagogue. Let's see why. Aval beharbe kehilais ein makpidin be'elu dvarim. He says a lot of people are not careful about this. At the end of the day, this is the custom. It goes according to the custom of the community. I'm not sure what you're supposed to do. It seems like if the first minyan takes out the Torah and the second minyan is there, they hear the reading, so they shouldn't bring out the Torah again. But he doesn't say that little part at the what happens if they didn't hear the reading? He says if the second minyan, they should only take out the Torah once. If you didn't hear, you didn't hear. Because the idea is that there's a reading in the shul. But he says most communities are not careful, don't go with that, and that's taka the minig you see anywhere. That if there's a rotation of minyanim, which happens in any big shul, so then they will take out this Torah a second time. So some poskim, hold on, let me just finish the footnotes. Halachic authorities, 35 is in those synagogues where there are many minyanim praying, one following the other, the law does not apply. Okay, so here he's saying clearly that we don't have this idea of not taking out a second Sefer Torah. I'm not sure if he's totally arguing on the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in the footnote, or if he's just differentiating between like one or two minyanim and a proper rotation of minyanim. Okay, yes, we're going to stop here. Aaron, you had a question.
Yeah, okay. So in our shul on Shabbos, they have an early minyan. So they take the Torah from upstairs and bring it to the smaller place to pray. And then when they're done, they bring it up to us and put it back in. And then we take it out and reread it.
He says everything goes according to the custom. And also it seems like that maybe the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was talking in a time where there was like kind of it wasn't like a systemized, scheduled rotation of minyanim. So that's like, people sometimes you come into shul and the daven mincha on Shabbos afternoon when we read. And people, Shabbos afternoon, sometimes it's hard for everyone to come on time. Groups together another 10 people who missed the Kriya and say, okay, we want to do another minyan. So then it's not like an official minyan. It's just that people came late to show. Then maybe you shouldn't take out the Torah a second time. That's really kind of what the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is talking about. When in your case, where there's a rotation and a schedule of different times, that's what he means in the footnote. And we don't go by that ruling. Actually, let's just finish the last law, though we said we're going to only go a half hour because it's the last law of the chapter. You could force the inhabitants of the community of a city to build a shul. You can't say we don't want a shul. Everyone has to pay a tax to build a shul and a yeshiva and to buy the books that you need for the yeshiva and for the shul. In a place that doesn't have a consistent minyan, that if you're tight with a minyan and people kind of are lazy, you could penalize members of the city if they don't show up because they're causing that there should be no minyan. That we shouldn't have the consistency of the minyan. Even those who are studying and by coming to the minyan, they're going to have to stop learning. If they're making up the minyan, because there's a time for study and a time for davening. And especially if they're part of the minyan, they can't say, well, we're learning. They have to stop learning and make up the minyan. Okay, so this actually is good. We finished the chapter. Ezra Hashem Yisbarach next Motzaei Shabbos. With all God's help, we will start chapter number 13. Thank you for joining. Shavua Tov, Laila Tov.